In this video, we're going to go ahead and we're going to set up an enemy. So we'll import this from a different asset pack. We'll then add a couple of little spikes here to make the enemy bounce back and forth between them and turn left and right as he hits them. We're also going to add in an animator to make the animations for the enemies walking here. And that's what we'll do in this video. So we'll go ahead and let's get started. To start off, we're going to need to import the enemy into the game. I will be using the simple 2D platformer assets pack from the asset store. The link to that will be in the description below. You can follow the link and you'll be taken here. Then you can click on Open in Unity and Open Unity Editor. This is going to bring up your package manager with that selected, and you'll go ahead and be able to click on Download or Import. And then if it asks you to install some dependencies, you'll have to install them here. And once that's done, you can click on Import. And then now we will have this into our game here. So now I'm going to go ahead and once we have this asset opened up, go into the sprites folder, into the enemy, and drag in the idle 0 here. And then we're going to need to add a couple of things to this. So click on Add Component, and then we're going to need a rigid body 2D. And we're also going to need to add in a box collider. So we get a box collider 2D as well. Then over here, I'm going to rename this one to our enemy. And then I'm going to also want to add in a ground check that we're going to be using later. So I'm going to right click on our enemy and go down here to create empty. And I'll call this one ground check. And we're going to zoom in a little bit, and I'm simply going to move this to right below the enemy's position, basically. So we can check that we're on the ground. And then we're going to go ahead and drag this over into our prefabs folder to create a prefab for this. Next, I'm going to probably move this over here actually for now. I think this is where we'll set up our first enemy. So I will put him over here. For this, I'm going to go over here and we're going to add in a collider. This one is going to be a polygon collider 2D. And I'm actually going to mark this one as is trigger so I don't forget later on, as we're going to be using this for collision with our enemy to make the enemy bounce back and forth. And then I'm going to rename this to spike and drag this into our prefabs folder. And then I'm going to go ahead and duplicate one of these and move it to the other side here. And maybe we'll also, I don't know, maybe we'll also change the color. So if we want to change the color of the prefab, we can either come over here and click on it over here, or we can actually click this little arrow here next to one of the objects and go into the prefab. And now we're going to edit the prefab itself. So if we go in here and under the sprite renderer, we'll select a new color. I don't know, maybe some sort of like a dark grayish color would be okay for a spike. We'll go ahead and select that and we'll go back out and you'll see that it updated both of those. So that changed the actual prefab itself, not just the object inside of our game there. Next up, we're going to want to create a script for our enemy movement. So we'll go into our scripts folder and create a new script. I'm simply going to call this one enemy. And then I'm going to attach this to our enemy so we don't forget. And when we do that, we want to, if we do it the way that I just did it here, we'll want to go over here and click on overrides and click apply all to make sure that gets applied to the prefab and not just this object again. All right, so once inside the script, we'll go ahead and we'll start working on getting this set up. I'm going to go ahead and remove these comments for now. And then at the top here, we're going to want a serialized field. And this one is going to be of a type float, and this is simply going to be called our move speed. And I'm going to set this one to 3F by default. And this is just going to be the speed at which the enemy moves, and it's going to be adjustable inside of the inspector. And then we're going to want another serialized field here, and this is going to be of type transform. And this one's going to be called the ground check. So this one's going to be it's going to be our transform that represents the position to check if the enemy is on the ground or not. And then we're going to have another serialized field, and this one is going to be of type layer mask. And this one's going to be called the ground layer. and this is going to be it's going to specify which layer constitutes as the ground. And then down here, we're going to need a couple private ones as well. Oops. So the first one is going to be of a type rigid body 2D. And we're just going to call this one RB for rigid body. This is going to get a reference to the rigid body 2D of the enemy. And then we're going to have another private, and this is going to be of type bool. And this is going to be is facing right. And we're going to set this one to true by default. And this is going to track whether or not the enemy is facing right, so we know which way he's facing. And then we'll also want another private bool, and this one's going to be is grounded, so whether or not the enemy is grounded. And by default, we're going to set that one to false, and that's just checking if he's grounded. So then inside of start here, we're going to want to get a reference, get and store a reference to the rigid body 2D component. So we're going to be doing RB, setting that equal to the get component rigid body 2D. All right, so then now we're going to want to set up actually make the enemy move. So instead of using update, we're going to actually use fixed update. And then inside here, the first thing we're going to do is make sure that the enemy is grounded. So we're going to do is grounded, and we're going to set that one equal to our physics 2D dot overlap circle. And then here we're going to do our ground check dot position, comma 0.1f, comma, and then the ground layer. And so this is going to check if the enemy is grounded by checking for like an overlap with the ground layer with or at this ground check position. And so next we're going to want to go ahead and move the enemy in a horizontal direction based on which way the enemy is currently facing. So this is going to be an if statement. So we'll say if, and then we're going to do is facing right. And here we can simply do, again, we don't need the curly brackets because we're only going to have the one line. So we're just going to do set the velocity. So our rigid body's velocity is going to equal a new vector 2. And that vector 2 is going to be our move speed, and then the RB dot velocity y. And this is going to make them go to the right if they are facing right. Else, we're going to want to make them go left. So here we're going to do the RB dot velocity, and that's going to equal, again, another new vector 2 with our RB dot velocity y. And here we're going to put the negative move speed and then the RB dot velocity dot y. And that will make them move to the left. And so now we're going to need to make a way to actually flip these directions so they're not always only going to the right. Here, so this is going to be a private void, and I'm just going to call this one flip. We're going to flip the enemy's direction by toggling the boolean that we set up top there. So we're going to do is facing right, and that's going to equal is not, or not is facing right. So when we're flipping, if they are facing right, they're no longer facing right once we flip it. And then to actually like change the sprite's direction, we're going to multiply the x scale by a -1 to flip that. So what we can do is vector 3, and then we'll just call it, I don't know, the scale, for example, and that's going to equal the transform dot local scale. And then we can simply say the scale dot x, scale dot x, and then this will be a times equals -1. And then the transform dot local scale is going to equal the scale. So this will flip the sprite's direction, and And then now we need to actually call this, and we want this to be called whenever the enemy collides with an object. So what we'll do is right above this, we're just going to do another private void, and this one we're going to use the on triggers. So this is going to be on trigger enter, and make sure you select 2D there. So basically we're going to want to say if the enemy collides with an object, then we want to change its direction. So we're going to say if, and here it's going to be collision. That's what we're using over there. So the game object, and then we're going to use .compare tag. So we're going to compare the tag of the object that we collide with, and we'll just go with like wall for now. I think we'll put that tag on there. So if we collide with an object that has the tag of wall, then we're going to call flip. All right, so back in the editor here, we have to do a couple of things. First thing is if we click on one of our spikes and we actually go into the spike, for example, we need to go up here to the tag and we need to add a tag for wall. So we'll click on add tag, click the little plus symbol, type in wall, make sure you save it or you type it in correctly. And then if we just go back into it, now we have the option for wall. So we'll go ahead and select that. Then next in the enemy, what we need to do is we need to change a couple of these things. So again, we'll go into the prefab, the ground check. We need to drag in the ground check into this transform here. And then the ground layer, we're simply going to go ahead and select ground from that. So if we go ahead and click on play now, and if we watch here, we should see the enemy moving to the right and then bouncing back to the left, which it is doing. You will notice that the enemy is looking the wrong way. There's a couple of easy ways we can fix that. We can go back into the code and change it, or we can simply come over here to our transform, and on the scale, just type in a -1 on the X here. Now, if we press play, he should be looking correctly. So now he's looking to the right, now he's looking to the left. So now that we have our enemy moving back and forth as he hits the spikes, to make this look a little bit better, we'll probably want to add in some animations for our enemy so he's not just sliding across the ground there. So we can start off doing that by going into our animations folder over here, and we'll go over to create, and then we're going to want to create an animation controller or an animator controller. And this one we're going to call enemy. And then if we double click that, that'll open up here. And then if we go back onto our enemy here, so back on our enemy here, back on our enemy here, we're going to want to go and add a component, and this is going to be an animator component. And then for the controller, we'll want to go ahead and add our enemy controller that we just created. And then now with our enemy selected, we can go down, or at least on mine, we have the animation window here. If you don't have it in one of your areas here, you can go ahead and click on a window here and animation, and you can find it here, and click on it and put it wherever you would like. I just have mine down here. But once you have this animation window open, you can go ahead and you can click on create here, and that's going to open up a folder. Just make sure it's in the right area. Mine's in my animations folder, and I'm gonna go ahead and call mine enemy run, as that's what we're gonna have the enemy do, running back and forth. And for our basic enemy, this is the only animation they're gonna do. So nothing too much to this. Maybe later on we'll add like a death animation or something like that. But for now, all they're gonna do is run back and forth. And now for this, our pack actually already has the animations here. So we'll go back to the sprites folder here, find the enemy, and we'll grab the run animations and drag them into this little timeline. Now, if we go back to our scene view and I click on play, you'll see that it's really fast. Obviously, we don't want him running that fast. So what we can do is simply drag the little bar down here and expand it, and you'll see that he's moving quite a bit slower. So we'll go ahead and move this to however you want your enemy to look. I don't know, maybe something like that is good for me. So then now if we go ahead and try playing again, we should see that this guy's moving back and forth, and he's walking, turning around, which is good. Also, if we actually move down here in our game view, we'll see our player can run through these for now, but that's all right. He also kind of interacts with the enemy at the moment, but doesn't actually do anything. So we'll go ahead and, we'll adjust those things here in later videos. But so far, it looks like we have our enemy and we have him moving around how we would expect. So currently in this one, we have the enemy here and he's walking back and forth as we would expect, and he has his animation going. In the next video, maybe we'll add some sort of either health for the player or some sort of damage, and make it so that these spikes damage and the enemy damages the player, those kind of things. And maybe we'll start adding in a couple more things. Maybe over here, we'll add in some more stuff for our level here to continue making the game. So thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.